A few years ago, I attended my 25-year high school class reunion one hot night in Chicago. Now, many of my classmates and we come up together ever since the third grade. So that means I knew these people very well. Mhm. So we commenced to reminiscing and carrying on. And we remember the time when Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. himself moved into our neighborhood. Now, I remember it was right around the corner from where I lived over on 16th and Hamlin in the third floor apartment building on the second floor over Wallace's dry goods store. Now, that's right across the street from Big Percy, kind of catacorner-like. So at the reunion, I told my classmates about a photographer fella I had met in California by the name of Roland Charles. Now, Roland, he was working on what they called a pictorial review of the civil rights movement. So I'm at his studio and I'm looking in his book, and lo and behold, I see a picture of Reverend King, and he's surrounded by several neighborhood children. Well, I recognized them right off. It was Isaiah Branch, Sarah Brunson, Geraldine Mobley, and some other kids we had gone to school with. And on that next page, Dr. King was delivering a speech to a crowd of people from the back porch of that same building in the old neighborhood. So I'm looking at this picture and I'm saying to myself, well, I'll be. And Roland, looking over my shoulder, he's all excited, see? He said like, yeah, that's quite a piece of history now, ain't it? And I say, what you talking about, Roland? Ain't no history going on in that picture. Now I know what I was talking about because I was there, you see. I said, look at that picture, man. Oh, Isaiah Branch didn't even comb his nappy head. Now, you know you got to comb your hair for history now, right or wrong? Oh yeah, you got to comb your hair. History break out, some fool snap a picture, and there you are. You stuck with a nappy head from now on. You not only embarrass your parents, but your grandparents, your children, and their children too, because you just can't go back and comb no nappy head picture. Now ask Oprah Winfrey. So I told Roland, I remember that day because a few days after that, I personally marched with Reverend King when he and Dick Gregory went down there and placed the list of demands on the doors of City Hall. But there wasn't no history going on because I was there, you see. I remember it was hot, real hot that day. And we were walking down Lakeshore Drive coming from the Soldier Field. And I remember a lot of angry, racist white people standing on the sidelines screaming all kinds of nasty things at us. Now I was hoping like hell that none of them made the mistake of confusing me with one of those nonviolent turn the other cheek kind of fellas, because, well, I would have hate to have disappointed Dr. King, let's put it like that. I understand they told me a few years later that James Earl Ray killed Dr. King. Things really got hot then. Yeah, he made a bad decision. But he wasn't the only one. My classmates and I, we remember a year later when they went over on the west side and they killed them boys, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark of the Illinois Black Panther Party. Now it was State's Attorney Edward V. Hanrahan and the Chicago Police Department. They went up in that west side apartment early in the morning before the sun came up, and they killed them boys while they were sleeping. And within a couple of hours, not long after that, my classmates and I, well, we walked out of school and we marched 5 miles to the scene of that crime because we wanted to see with our own eyes just what they did. And I remember looking down in a bed soaked with what seems like gallons of still wet blood, where Fred Hampton was shot in his head point blank as he lay sleeping next to his pregnant fiance. Excuse me, did I know her name? Oh, that was Mr. Johnson's daughter, Deborah Johnson. They don't call her that anymore. These days, she calls herself Akua and Jerry, but she Mr. Johnson's daughter, still the same. Now, if you don't believe me, check the birth certificate. The girl was just 19 years old. She was 8.5 months pregnant. And she didn't need that kind of aggravation, not at that point in her life. I remember standing in that kitchen looking at the window next to the back door on the porch. And we saw how the window was cut just as nice and clean and neatly with a glass cutter by the uniformed pig who climbed in there and let the rest of them in. And we saw how they scurried down this long hallway and situated themselves in the front room and stood in front of a wall like a firing squad. Why? Because on the other side of that wall was the wall to Fred Hampton's bedroom. And standing in that exact same spot, we saw how they just riddled that wall with seems like hundreds of rounds of bullets. And all of the bullets were going in and none was coming out during this so-called shootout. That wall looked like a big old piece of Swiss cheese. And when we saw that, we knew right then and there that Fred and Mark had never had a chance. They never had a chance. This was an execution. They murdered them boys. They murdered Fred Hampton. They murdered Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. That scene later on, for some reason, took a particular person. I personalized it because it was discovered that one of the victims in that so-called shootout was a 5th grade classmate of my sister, Joanne. And like Joanne, she was real smart and got all E's and G's in Mr. Dixon's schoolwork over at the William Penn Elementary School. Now I remember she was a pretty girl in a plain kind of way. And by this time she had a big old afro, but she still had Asian-like slanted eyes. So on the news, they called her China Doll. I remember how appalled my classmates and I were about the pure, deep arrogance of Mr. Edward V. Hanrahan, that he didn't care enough about what we thought to even seal off the scene. He didn't put up a barricade, no tapes, or anything to at least try to cover up his mess. He didn't care anything about what we thought, but you know what? He could care less, but he should have, because by that time, 1969, a lot of Negroes were becoming Black. And we realized that we still had to learn how to fight back. So me and my friends and all the young would-be revolutionaries, we talked to all of the grown folks in the neighborhood, Mr. Scott, Miss McDonald, Mama Luella, Miss Taylor, and Mr. Abraham Lincoln Jones. We told them, y'all got to get out and vote, because we couldn't, you understand? And we turned up the heat, sure did. And even though he was only 51 years old, we voted Mr. Edward V. Hanrahan into what they call an early retirement, never to hold another public job or office in the state of Illinois. Yep. James Earl Ray and Ed Hanrahan, they were two evil men. And surely they will burn in the hottest fires of hell for what they did. But you know what? They didn't even seem to care, not one bit. I guess that just goes to show you, some like it hot. Beware, brothers, beware. Thank you.
Bravo.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bravo.